The station was quiet during night cycle. Outside its windows, the stars floated like frozen sparks in an endless black sea. But inside the great biodome, there was life, soft, breathing, and glowing. People simply called it the garden. The garden was not small. It stretched across the middle of the orbital station like a hidden world. Transparent walls held in the air and warmth, and beneath them grew rows of tall trees, low bushes, and vines that spread across glass frames like lace. At night, the plants came alive in a way no one had expected. Their leaves glimmered faintly. Their flowers opened and released soft blue and green light, as if the stars had been planted in the soil instead of the sky. Raffi walked slowly along the stone path that cut through the middle. His boots made no sound against the moss-covered steps. He was not just a visitor, he was one of the garden's caretakers. Every day, he checked the water levels, measured soil health, and trimmed overgrown branches. But it was at night, when the dome was nearly empty, that he felt the garden truly revealed itself. He paused near a cluster of vines hanging from a curved arch. Their blossoms swayed, even though there was no breeze. The petals glowed brighter, then dimmed, then brightened again. At first, Raffi thought it was random, just some natural rhythm. Yet tonight, he stayed still longer, his eyes narrowing as he watched. The blossoms did not glow without order. They seemed to pulse in a pattern: long, short, short, long. It looked almost like a signal. Raffi tilted his head. Strange, he whispered, though no one was there to hear. For a moment, he thought about calling Myra, another caretaker who often worked beside him. But he shook his head. It would sound foolish to her. Plants glowing was not unusual here. Some of them had been designed by Earth scientists to absorb and store light from the station's lamps, releasing it slowly during the night to make the garden feel alive. But this was different. Raffi crouched down, his face close to the vine. The glow from the petals lit his features, painting his skin with shifting blue. He blinked as the pattern repeated again. The same sequence. It wasn't his imagination. He stood quickly, feeling his heart beat a little faster. He walked further down the path, deeper into the garden. Everywhere, he began to notice trees whose leaves flickered softly, bushes whose tips glowed in rising and falling waves, like breaths. The more he walked, the clearer it seemed. The garden was not just alive in the way plants are alive. It was alive in another way, one that was harder to explain. Raffi reached the center of the dome, where a small pond reflected the glow of the plants like a sheet of glass. He stood at the edge, staring at the water. On the far side, the tall reeds swayed gently, though no air moved. Their lights shimmered, one after the other, forming a line that ran along the pond's edge. He followed it with his eyes, tracing the gentle sequence. It almost looked as if the garden was speaking. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Raffi rubbed his hands together nervously. He tried to reason with himself. Perhaps it was a fault in the station's artificial light system, causing some plants to glow at irregular times. Perhaps the humidity inside the dome had shifted, creating rhythms in the way the leaves stored and released light. Science always had answers. But even as he thought these things, his heart told him otherwise. This was too precise. Too deliberate. He leaned down, picking up a small lamp that workers sometimes carried during night checks. He flicked it on, shining the beam across the vines. The blossoms closest to him glowed brighter, as if responding. He quickly turned the lamp off. They dimmed. He tried again: 1, 2, 3 flashes. The vines shimmered in a matching rhythm: 1, 2, 3. Raffi dropped the lamp in surprise. It clattered against the stone path, the sound far too loud in the silent dome. He bent down to pick it up quickly, his breath coming faster now. He could not deny it any longer. The garden had answered him. A shiver ran down his spine. If the plants could respond, if they could mimic the patterns of his light, then that meant something far greater than he had ever imagined. He stood frozen, surrounded by glowing vines, trees, and flowers. Their light pulsed softly around him, as if hundreds of unseen eyes were watching. For the first time, Raffi felt that he was not just walking through a collection of plants. He was standing in the presence of something ancient, patient, and waiting. The garden was listening. And it wanted to be heard. The next day, Raffi could not focus on his usual work. He watered the soil, adjusted the light filters, and checked the moisture levels, but his mind kept returning to the moment in the night, the glow, the patterns, the answer from the garden. It had not been his imagination. He was sure of it. The blossoms had replied. But who would believe him? The thought troubled him until he remembered Myra. She was one of the few who loved the garden as deeply as he did. Where others saw a workplace, Myra saw something close to sacred. She often spoke about how the garden reminded her of Earth's forgotten forests, places most people only knew from old pictures. If anyone could understand what he had seen, it was her. That evening, when the dome was quiet and the artificial sun dimmed to simulate night, Raffi waited by the central pond. The glow had already begun, tiny sparks of blue and green lighting the pathways. He heard the sound of soft footsteps and turned to see Myra carrying a small basket of tools. "You called me?" she asked gently, setting the basket down. Her dark hair caught the faint light of the vines as she looked at him with curious eyes. "Yes," Raffi said. His voice was steady, though inside he felt nervous. "I need to show you something. But you must keep an open mind." Myra gave a small smile. "You sound serious. What is it?" Raffi lifted the lamp he had hidden under his coat. He pointed it toward a cluster of vines hanging low over the water. The blossoms swayed faintly, glowing in their gentle rhythm. Then he flicked the lamp once, twice, 3 times. The blossoms replied. 1, 2, 3. Myra's smile faded. She stepped closer, her eyes wide. "Do that again," she whispered. Raffi repeated the signal. Again, the vines answered. For a long moment, Myra said nothing. She simply stared at the living lights as if she were seeing something beyond her understanding. Finally, she looked back at Raffi. "This is not possible." "I thought the same," Raffi admitted. "But it happened yesterday too. I think the garden is trying to speak." Myra crouched down, studying the blossoms carefully. She extended her hand but stopped just short of touching them, as if afraid she might disturb whatever force was at work. "It's not random," she said slowly. "There is order in it. Like a code." Raffi nodded quickly. "Yes. A pattern. I thought maybe it was just my imagination, but it's too clear. Too exact." The two of them sat by the pond for a long time, testing with the lamp. Short flashes, long flashes, pauses in between. Each time, the vines replied in a way that mirrored or responded. It was not perfect, but it was enough to convince Myra completely. When the hour grew late, Myra finally leaned back, her face glowing faintly from the reflected light. "Raffi," she said, her voice low but firm. "If this is real, then the garden is more than just plants. It is, alive in a way we never imagined. We could be standing among a different kind of mind." Her words sent a thrill through Raffi. He had thought the same, but hearing it aloud made it feel even more real. "But why now?" he asked. "The garden has been here for years. Why show itself tonight?" Myra thought for a moment. "Maybe it has been waiting. Watching us. And it finally decided we were ready to listen." The idea filled Raffi with equal parts wonder and unease. He glanced around at the glowing leaves, imagining unseen thoughts passing through them like quiet whispers. They continued experimenting, trying to send more complex patterns. At one point, Myra tapped a rhythm with the lamp that reminded Raffi of simple numbers. The vines responded in a longer sequence, repeating the rhythm twice. Myra gasped softly. It understands. It's trying to teach us. The word teach struck something deep in Raffi's chest. Until now, humans had always been the ones teaching plants, shaping, modifying, and engineering them to survive in new environments. But here, in the silence of the dome, the roles were reversed. Eventually, the glow around them grew softer, as if the garden were tired. The plants slowly closed their blossoms, ending the exchange. Myra stood, brushing her hands against her trousers. We need to be careful, Raffi. If we tell the others, they will laugh, or worse, they will see this as a threat. Raffi frowned. But we can't just keep it to ourselves. This is something greater than us. Something the whole station should know. Not yet, Myra said firmly. First we must learn more. If we rush, they will cut into the garden for tests. They will hurt it before they even understand. Her words were heavy with truth, and Raffi knew she was right. Still, the thought of keeping the secret pressed on him like a weight. That night, as Myra left and the dome sank deeper into darkness, Raffi remained by the pond. He stared at the faint glimmers still dancing among the reeds, listening to their silent whispers. He realized something important. The garden was not just alive. It was waiting. Waiting for someone to listen long enough to hear its voice. And now, it had found two listeners, him and Myra. The following night, Raffi returned to the garden with a strange excitement in his chest. His hands felt restless, and his thoughts kept circling the same idea: if the garden had answered them, then perhaps it could also speak first. Myra met him at the usual spot near the pond. She carried a small notebook this time, its pages already filled with neat marks and symbols. I couldn't stop thinking about it, she admitted as she sat beside him. If this really is a code, then we must record everything carefully. Every pattern. Every pause. Otherwise, we may miss the meaning. Raffi nodded eagerly. He had never seen her so focused. Usually, Myra worked calmly and slowly, but now her eyes shone with curiosity. The dome was quiet except for the hum of the station's air system. Around them, the plants glowed faintly in their nightly rhythm. Raffi held the lamp close, ready to begin. Do you think it will answer again tonight? He asked. Myra gave a small smile. There's only one way to know. He raised the lamp and flashed 3 quick pulses, followed by a pause. The blossom swayed and answered with 3 pulses in return. Myra quickly drew marks in her notebook. Good, she whispered. It remembers. Encouraged, Raffi tried a longer rhythm, 2 short flashes, then 1 long. The garden hesitated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the vines glowed faintly, repeating his signal but adding an extra short pulse at the end. Myra gasped. It changed it? It didn't just copy, it added something. Raffi's heart raced. It's replying. They tried again, creating different sequences. Sometimes the plants repeated exactly. Sometimes they changed the pattern slightly, as though correcting or guiding. With each attempt, Myra scribbled in her notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. This is a language, she said softly. It may not be like ours, but it follows rules. We're only touching the surface of it. Raffi looked at the glowing vines with awe. Then we're not just caretakers anymore. We're students. For nearly an hour they worked, sending and receiving light across the pond. At times, the garden seemed playful, flashing quickly as if testing them. Other times it slowed, holding its glow as though waiting for the humans to catch up. The more they watched, the more it felt alive, not just alive as plants, but alive as something that thought. At last, something happened that neither expected. After one sequence, the blossoms did not merely flash, they curled open wider, releasing a soft cloud of glowing spores into the air. The tiny motes drifted like stars across the pond, rising and swirling gently around Raffi and Myra. Raffi froze, holding his breath. The spores glimmered faintly, and as they touched his skin, warmth spread through him, not heat, but something softer, like a memory of sunlight. His mind filled with an image, so sudden and vivid that he stumbled backward. He saw Earth, not the polluted cities or empty deserts he knew from stories, but a green world full of forests, towering trees, rivers running clear, skies bright with unbroken blue. He smelled rain and heard birdsong, though none of these things existed in the dome. Then the image faded, leaving only the soft glow of the spores around him. Raffi gasped for breath. "Did you see that?" he asked, turning to Myra. She looked pale, her eyes wide, her notebook forgotten in her lap. "Yes," she whispered. "I saw forests. The old Earth." They sat in silence, the spores slowly fading into the air. The garden's lights dimmed, as though it had given them all it could for one night. Raffi pressed his hand to his chest, his heart pounding. "It showed us something. A memory. It's memory." Myra swallowed hard. "That means it has been watching for a very long time. Maybe longer than we think. These plants, they're not just grown here. They must have a history. A story older than ours." The thought filled Raffi with wonder and fear. What kind of beings had seeded the garden? Were they still out there, among the stars? Or had they left their children the plants as their voice? Myra closed her notebook carefully, her hands trembling. "This is no longer just an experiment. Raffi, we are speaking with something that remembers the world before us. If the others discover this too soon, they will not see it as life. They will see it as a resource. Or a danger." Raffi nodded slowly, though his heart rebelled at the thought of keeping such a secret. "But what if it wants to tell more? What if it is waiting for us to ask the right question?" Myra looked at him with steady eyes. "Then we must learn its language quickly. Because soon, others will notice. And once they do, we will no longer be in control." The two of them sat silently, surrounded by the soft glow of the garden. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant, but here inside the dome, another kind of starlight pulsed patiently through leaves and flowers, waiting. For the first time, humanity had not only spoken into the darkness. The darkness had spoken back. The next few nights became a secret routine for Raffi and Myra. While most of the station slept, the two of them slipped quietly into the garden, carrying only their lamp and Myra's notebook. Each time, the plants responded. Each time, the patterns grew clearer. And sometimes, when the blossoms opened wide and released their glowing spores, visions followed. These visions were never the same. One night, Raffi saw wide plains filled with tall grass, waving endlessly under a golden sky. Myra, on the same night, saw something different, a mountain wrapped in clouds, its sides covered in green vines just like those inside the dome. The garden was showing them memories. Myra was the first to say it aloud. "These are not dreams, Raffi. They are pieces of a story. The garden is trying to tell us where it came from." Raffi agreed, though the thought both thrilled and unsettled him. If the garden had memories, then it had a history. And if it had a history, it meant it was more than just a plant. It was a traveler, a survivor. One night, after they exchanged several light signals, the blossoms responded with the brightest glow yet. A wave of petals opened across the dome, and clouds of spores filled the air. The two caretakers closed their eyes as the glowing motes touched their skin. This time, the vision was stronger, almost overwhelming. Raffi found himself standing on a barren plain beneath a dark sky. A huge comet streaked overhead, trailing light and fire. As he looked closer, he saw that tiny glowing seeds rained down from it, scattering across soil, rock, and water. Wherever the seeds landed, green life began to bloom. His chest tightened as he realized what he was seeing. The garden's ancestors had come to Earth not by design of humans, but by chance from the stars themselves. Beside him, Myra gasped softly. Her vision matched his. They arrived on a comet, she whispered. Long ago. Before us. The vision faded slowly, leaving them kneeling by the pond, their hands still glowing faintly from the spores. Silence filled the dome, heavy and sacred. Raffi finally spoke. They have been here all along. Watching us. Growing with us. The garden is not just ours. It is older than humanity itself. Myra looked down at her notebook, her fingers trembling slightly as she tried to write. It explains everything. Why the plants feel so different from anything on Earth. Why their light follows patterns. They are not just plants, they are a kind of mind. A memory carried by the seeds. Raffi stared at the glowing reeds across the pond, his voice low. Then the question is, why are they speaking to us now? After so many years of silence. Myra shook her head. Maybe they have always been trying. Maybe we only just learned how to listen. The thought filled both of them with quiet awe. For so long, humanity had searched the skies for signs of intelligent life. They had sent signals into the void, hoping for an answer. And all the while, intelligence had been rooted in their very soil, patient, waiting for the moment when humans would finally notice. But joy was mixed with worry. If the garden was truly alive in this way, then what would happen when the rest of the station found out? Already, there were officers who treated the dome as little more than a source of fresh air and food. If they knew the plants could think, they might not respect them. Raffi thought back to the supply officers who sometimes complained that the garden used too much of the station's resources. They won't see life, he said quietly. They'll see something dangerous. Or something useful. Myra closed her notebook firmly. That is why we must protect it. Until we understand more, this secret stays with us. Raffi hesitated, torn between his sense of duty to the station and the bond he felt growing with the garden. In the end, he nodded. You're right. If this is the first voice of another world, we cannot let it be silenced. That night, before leaving, Raffi turned back one last time. The plants shimmered faintly, as if aware of his promise. For a moment, he felt a connection deeper than words, an understanding that stretched across time itself. The garden had traveled through the stars, carried on comets, wading through centuries. It had survived fire, cold, and silence. And now, at last, it had found listeners. Raffi whispered softly into the quiet air, "We hear you." The blossoms glowed brighter, as though answering. For days, Raffi and Myra guarded their secret. They spoke with the garden only at night, when the station was quiet, and each time the plants showed them more. Patterns became clearer, spores carried visions of forests and rivers, and the feeling of connection grew stronger. But secrets are not easy to keep. One evening, as Raffi adjusted the water system, he overheard two supply officers speaking near the entrance of the dome. "These plants are using too many resources," one muttered. "Nutrients, water, power for the lamps, it all goes here." "And for what?" "Flowers. Glow." The other officer nodded. "I told the commander we should cut back. Harvest some of the vines, maybe even clear sections for storage. We don't need so much greenery." Raffi froze, his hands tightening around the wrench. The thought of anyone cutting the garden filled him with a cold anger. These officers saw only numbers and space, they did not see the intelligence pulsing in the leaves, the ancient memory breathing in the spores. That night, he told Myra what he had heard. She looked troubled but not surprised. "I feared this," she said quietly. "To them, the garden is just a tool. They will never understand what we've seen. Not unless they see it themselves. But if they see it," Raffi argued, "they will want to control it. They will test it, cut it, maybe even destroy it. Myra nodded slowly. Which is why we must be careful. One mistake, and the garden could be treated as a threat. Their fears became real only a few nights later. A group of workers entered the dome with cutting tools, their orders clear: reduce the size of the garden to save resources. Raffi and Myra were not there when it began, but they heard the news the next morning. The vines fought back, a worker told them in disbelief. We tried to cut, but the branches wrapped around the machines. Couldn't move them at all. Like they were alive. Raffi and Myra exchanged a glance but said nothing. Later that night, when they entered the dome, they saw the damage. Several machines lay tangled in roots and vines, completely immobilized. The plants glowed faintly, but the light was sharper now, almost defensive. Raffi stepped carefully along the path. They protected themselves, he whispered. Myra touched one of the vines gently. It loosened at her touch, releasing the machine it had captured. They're afraid, she said softly. Afraid of being harmed. Just like us. For the first time, fear spread through the station. Rumors grew quickly: the garden was dangerous, the plants were not natural, the dome was no longer safe. Some spoke of burning sections of it. Others demanded more guards. Raffi felt the weight of every word. The place he loved, the place that had whispered to him in gentle light, was now seen as a monster by those who had never listened. Myra tried to calm him. Fear comes from ignorance, she said. They do not know what we know. That is why they see danger instead of wonder. But Raffi's doubt was heavy. What if they were wrong? What if the garden was only pretending to be peaceful? He remembered how easily the vines had crushed the machines. If they chose to turn against the people of the station, nothing could stop them. That night, Raffi stayed longer than Myra. He walked deep into the dome, past the pond, until he stood in the middle of glowing reeds. Their soft light surrounded him like a circle. He spoke aloud, his voice unsteady. What are you? Are you truly here to share with us? Or are we only food for you, like the machines you wrapped? For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the blossoms began to open, brighter than ever before. A cloud of spores lifted into the air, swirling around him. Images filled his mind again, images of growth, not destruction. He saw seeds landing on barren stone and turning it green. He saw rivers once dry, now flowing with life. He saw humans, long ago, resting beneath trees that had once fallen from the stars. The message was clear. The garden was not an enemy. It was a giver of life. It defended itself only when harmed. Raffi exhaled, his heart steadying. I believe you, he whispered. But he also knew belief alone would not be enough. The others on the station would need proof. Proof that the garden was more than a threat. Proof that it could be trusted. When Myra returned the next night, he told her everything. She listened carefully, then closed her notebook with a firm hand. Then we must be brave. We must show them what we have seen. If we hide, the garden will be destroyed out of fear. But if we reveal the truth, maybe, just maybe, they will learn to listen too. Raffi hesitated. Fear still lingered in his chest, but he nodded. We will try. For the garden. As they left the dome, the plants glowed softly behind them, as though blessing their choice. But in the shadows of the station, rumors continued to grow like weeds. Fear had taken root, and fear was harder to cut than any vine. The days that followed were tense. The station's corridors buzzed with whispers about the garden. Some said the plants were dangerous and must be destroyed. Others said they were miracles, worth studying but not trusting. Everywhere Raffi walked, he heard the same word repeated in different tones: fear. Myra tried to stay calm. We must wait, she told Raffi as they checked the nutrient tanks one afternoon. Fear always grows fast, but truth grows slower and lasts longer. But Raffi could not rest. Every time he entered the dome, he felt the garden's quiet presence waiting for him. It was no longer just a place of work or beauty, it was like a living companion, patient but worried. The glow of the leaves seemed dimmer, as if the garden knew it was being doubted. That night, Raffi made a choice. He returned to the garden alone. No notebook, no lamp, no tools. Only himself. The dome was silent except for the hum of the water pumps. The path glowed faintly from the light of blossoms hanging overhead. Raffi walked slowly to the pond and sat down, his reflection mixing with the shimmer of reeds in the water. He took a deep breath. "I don't know if I can protect you," he said aloud. His voice echoed softly in the glass dome. "People are afraid. They think you are a danger. Even Myra fears what might happen if they act against you. And I don't know what to believe anymore." He lowered his head into his hands. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, softly, the glow of the garden brightened around him. The reeds swayed, blossoms opened, and spores rose into the air like tiny fireflies. Raffi lifted his head, watching the slow dance of light. He did not raise a lamp or send signals this time. He only spoke with his heart. "If you want us to trust you," he whispered, "then show me. Show me that you mean no harm." The spores drifted closer, surrounding him in a gentle cloud. Warmth spread through his body, not frightening but comforting, like sunlight after a storm. His vision blurred, and then the images came. He saw human hands planting seeds in soil. The seeds were the same as those glowing around him now. He saw children resting beneath strange trees, their faces calm, safe in the shade. He saw rivers cleansed by roots, cities made breathable again by glowing vines. The garden was showing him not destruction, but friendship. Not threat, but partnership. It had lived alongside humanity quietly for centuries, giving without asking, waiting until the right time to be heard. Tears filled Raffi's eyes. He pressed his hand against the moss by the pond. "I understand," he said softly. "You want to help. You want to share. And you only defended yourself when we tried to harm you." The moss beneath his hand grew warmer, almost pulsing with life. A vine lifted gently from the ground and curled toward him. Slowly, carefully, it touched his wrist, not tight, not threatening, only resting there like a hand in greeting. Raffi's heart steadied. He felt the quiet truth in that touch. The garden trusted him. When the spores faded and the glow dimmed, he knew his doubt was gone. He stood and looked around the dome, his voice steady now. "I will trust you," he said. "And I will help others to trust you too." The next morning, Myra found him waiting outside the garden. He looked tired but calmer than she had seen in days. "You stayed all night?" she asked. "Yes," Raffi said simply. "And I know now. The garden is not our enemy. It is our ally. It showed me visions again, visions of life, of how it has always helped us. We must prove this to the others." Myra studied his face carefully, then nodded. "If you are sure, then we will do it together. But it will not be easy. Fear makes people blind." "Then we will guide them," Raffi replied. Later that day, the commander called a meeting. Officers and workers gathered, many of them demanding action against the garden. Some wanted it cut down, others sealed away. The room was filled with anger and suspicion. Raffi stepped forward, his hands trembling but his voice strong. "You see danger because you do not understand," he said. "But I have been with the garden. I have spoken with it. It is not here to harm us, it is here to help us." The room erupted in disbelief. Shouts rose, questions fired at him. But Raffi did not falter. He told them about the signals, the patterns, the visions of forests and rivers. He told them about the night the garden touched him, not with violence but with trust. Myra stood beside him, holding up her notebook filled with recorded patterns. "It speaks," she said firmly. "We have proof. We only need patience to learn." The officers were divided. Some still doubted, some were afraid, but others began to listen. Seeds of curiosity were planted among the fear. That night, when Raffi returned once more to the garden, the glow was brighter than ever before. The plants pulsed in soft waves of light, surrounding him in warmth. He smiled, whispering, "They will see you one day. I promise." And deep in the quiet dome, the garden seemed to breathe back in gentle reply. The garden was no longer quiet. Not because its glow had changed, but because the station itself had. After Raffi and Myra spoke in the meeting, the crew began to argue in every corridor. Some still called the plants dangerous, while others began to wonder if the caretakers were telling the truth. The station felt divided, as if the people inside were two different worlds. Raffi walked the halls with heavy steps. Everywhere he turned, questions followed him. "Is it true? Did the plants really speak to you? Are we safe in the dome? Why should we believe you?" He answered as best as he could, but words alone could not fight fear. He knew what they needed was proof, something no one could deny. Myra agreed. "The garden trusted us because we listened," she said one evening. "Now we must show the others. We cannot hide it anymore." So they made a plan. That night, instead of meeting in secret, Raffi and Myra invited the commander and several officers into the dome. Many came reluctantly, their hands close to their belts as if expecting danger. The glow of the garden met them at the entrance, soft and welcoming, but still they looked at the plants as if they were traps waiting to close. Raffi stepped forward, his heart pounding. He carried the same lamp he had used on the very first night. "Watch," he said simply. He flashed the lamp in 3 quick pulses. The blossoms across the pond answered in 3 pulses of their own. Gasps rose from the officers, some stepping back in alarm, others leaning forward in wonder. Again Raffi signaled, 2 short flashes and 1 long. The plants repeated the signal, then added an extra glow. Myra lifted her notebook and showed the matching patterns she had recorded for days. "It is not random," she explained firmly. "It is a language." Still, doubt lingered in many faces. One officer muttered, "Maybe it's only reacting to the light. Nothing more." Raffi's chest tightened. He knew this moment mattered. He set the lamp aside and spoke softly, almost like a prayer. "Show them. Please." As if answering, the blossoms across the dome began to open one by one. A wave of glowing spores lifted into the air, drifting toward the group. Some officers raised their hands in fear, but the commander held still, his eyes fixed on the slow, shining dance of motes. The spores touched them gently, and visions followed. The commander gasped, his voice shaking. "I see, a river. Flowing clean. I smell rain." Another officer whispered, "Forests. A sky without smoke. I see it too." The spores carried memory into each of them, just as they had with Raffi and Myra. The garden was no longer silent, it was speaking to everyone at once. When the visions faded, the dome was quiet except for the sound of unsteady breaths. The officers looked at one another, their eyes wide not with fear now, but with awe. Raffi spoke into the silence. "The garden is not our enemy. It has always been here, waiting for us to listen. It can help us heal our air, teach us to survive on worlds we thought were dead. All it asks is that we do not harm it." Myra added softly, "This is not just a collection of plants. It is a voice from the stars. If we choose fear, we will silence it forever. If we choose trust, we may build something greater than we ever imagined." The commander stood very still, then finally nodded. "No one is to cut the garden again," he ordered. His voice carried the weight of decision. From this day, it will be studied but with care. With respect. If it truly wishes peace, then we will meet it with peace. Relief flooded through Raffi. He glanced at Myra, and she gave a small, hopeful smile. That night, when the officers left, Raffi remained inside the dome. The glow of the plants surrounded him, brighter than he had ever seen before. It felt like a celebration, as if the garden itself knew it had been heard not just by 2 caretakers, but by an entire station of people. He sat by the pond, his reflection rippling beside the reeds. "They believe now," he whispered. "Not all, but enough. You will not be alone anymore." The blossoms swayed gently, and for a moment, Raffi thought he felt the faint warmth of spores brushing his cheek, almost like a smile. The days that followed brought change. Engineers worked alongside caretakers, learning from the plants instead of trying to cut them. The air inside the station grew cleaner, fresher than before. Water filters improved as the garden shared its quiet secrets. And though some fear remained, it began to fade, replaced by curiosity and wonder. For Raffi, the nights in the garden no longer felt lonely. He still came often, walking the quiet paths beneath glowing branches. Sometimes Myra joined him, sometimes others did too, but always the plants were there, patient, waiting, listening. The garden had spoken. Humanity had answered. And together, they had begun something new. Raffi placed his hand on the moss by the pond and whispered, "We are with you." The light pulsed back, steady and bright. And in that moment, he knew a truth that filled him with quiet joy: the garden was no longer just a place. It was a partner. It was a friend. It was the beginning of a new alliance.